Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another video and hope you guys are doing well today. And in this video, we're going to be covering everything you can think you need to know around Elemental Shaman in Cataclysm. This is going to be a long video, so bear with me. I'm going to make sure everything is timestamped, so please make sure that you can come back and reference the video for anything you might need to know. I'm going to try and cover as much information as possible. So yeah, thanks for watching and catch you later. Bye. Now, the first thing I want to cover is talent points. Now, this right in front of me is going to be your default PvE Ele Shami talents. Okay, so it's going to be 3 in Acuity, 3 in Concussion, 2 in Call of Flame, 1 in Elemental Warding, 2 in Reverberation, 3 in Elemental Precision, 2 in Rolling Thunder, 1 in Elemental Focus, 2 in Elemental Reach, 2 in Elemental Oath, 3 in Lava Flows, 1 in Fulmination, 1 in Elemental Mastery, 1 in Totemic Wrath, 3 in Feedback, 2 in Lava Surge, 2 in Elemental Weapons, 3 in Improved Shields, 2 in Ancestral Swiftness, and 2 in Ancestral Resolve. Now you have a couple of different things that you can pick up here. So your flex points revolve around Elemental Warding, Earth's Grasp, where you can, have a root on your Earthbind, good for some like heroic pulls or any bosses that have trash pulls to them, like trash mobs or ads. You can drop Ancestral Resolve if you want the higher amount of magic damage taken reduction all the time. Ancestral Resolve is very, very good, but it does only reduce damage taken while you're casting spells. So while you're using a Earth Shock or something, where you're like on the global cooldown and you're not casting a spell, you won't be getting that buff. But you'll be casting a good 90% of the time, so you do get this like reduction a lot of the time. In Enhancement, we just get the extra bonuses of Flame Tongue Weapon. Obviously, our Lightning Shield is going to be doing a lot through Fulmination. And then you'll be getting Ancestral Swiftness as well. So you do get quite a lot out of this, and I believe this is kind of the default talent setup that you'll be running. In terms of glyphs, then, we're going to be running Flame Shock, Lava Burst, and Glyph of Unleashed Lightning. Now, you can swap Glyph of Unleashed Lightning for Lightning Bolt. It is technically a damage increase if you can stand there and just cast. Now, there's not many bosses where they're going to allow you to do that, so we're pretty much going to be running Unleashed Lightning all of the time. Now, in our major glyphs, Glyph of Chain Lightning is a bit of a strange one. It strikes 2 additional targets, but it only becomes damage equivalent if you go at 4 targets. Now, obviously in Heroics, most pulls are going to be 4 targets or more, so it's going to be quite useful. However, if you don't want to use this one, you have a couple of options. You have Elemental Mastery, which reduces your damage taken while Elemental Mastery is up. Now, with our talent Feedback, we actually reduce the cooldown on this by quite a lot, so it is going to be up a lot more than you think it will, and that 20% can be quite key. You have Fire Nova, which can help in Heroics, but again, if you're going to be in Heroics, just run Chain Lightning. Or you have Healing Stream Totem, which is one that people really underrate. Being able to bring Fire, Frost, and Nature Resistance just constantly is very, very useful. There's no others that I would really consider taking, so that's kind of my options. Lightning Shield and Stoneclaw Totem are just going to be staples for me. Stoneclaw Totem, let me just move my camera. Stoneclaw Totem places a shield absorb on you equal to 4 times the strength of the shield it places on your totems. Now, if I just switch to WoW really quick and find my Stoneclaw Totem, it's putting a 16,000 shield on me at the moment, which is like just over 10% of my health. It's not insignificant, and if you need that extra defensive, it's so good, and it is on a 20-second cooldown as well. Finally then, for our minor glyphs, there's nothing really amazing here. Glyph of Renewed Life is the only one that I would say is just mandatory, but aside from that, there's nothing really major. Now, switching to our second talent calculator here, this is what I'm going to be running in pre-patch. So you can see we've dropped the points in Elemental Warding. We haven't got enough points to go over to Ancestral Resolve. Obviously, this is level 79, which will be the max that we can get. So we're going to pick up all of the same damage talents. We just won't have the defensive things or the utility of Ancestral Swiftness. In terms of our glyphs, things are going to be the same. Again, Chain Lightning. One thing that you may wish to switch to is just running Healing Stream all the time. With ICC being the current content, especially in pre-patch, being able to bring Frost Resist just constantly is kind of nice. So, yeah, that's kind of what I'll be running, and in pre-patch as well. And the final talent calculator is for PvP. Now, this is what I'm going to be running for my PvP spec. This is what I've pushed to over 2k in 2s and 3s with on servers that we don't talk about. Now, the differences here is we're not going to be taking feedback. Now, people may think I'm going crazy here, but you don't actually get to cast Lightning Bolt or Chain Lightning that often in arenas. A lot of your time is going to be spent maintaining Flame Shocks on targets, peeling, dropping totems, and bursting. So you don't really get to just sit there and tunnel DPS. And when you do, the fight's over so quickly anyway that you're not going to get multiple elemental masteries out. So we do run Earth's Grasp just to give yourself a little bit of a peel. We've got the Elemental Warding as well. We've only got 1 point in it. You can drop some points from Elemental Precision because you don't need all of that hit rating to pick up the Elemental Warding and be a bit tankier. But we have got the Ancestral Resolve, Spark of Life, which double dips, and Nature's Guardian, which is just kind of insane. Honestly, with this build, you are so tanky. You've got Flame Shock, Lava Burst, and Unleash Lightning. Same setup again. Use Lava Burst as your big burst combo. Lava Burst, Chain Lightning, Frost Shock. All hits at the same time if you're at maximum range. Hits extremely hard and you can one-shot people. Healing Stream Totem is incredible. You will get people that totem stomp in arenas, but, you know, Healing Stream Totem is so cheap that you don't want to just keep it up anyway. Lightning Shield is almost mandatory, and Stoneclaw Totem just gives us an extra defensive. So overall, these are my talent points that I'm going to be running throughout Cata in the pre-patch and at level 85 in both PvE and PvP. So, hope this helps. Now, for Elemental in Cataclysm in PvE, there's a couple of different stats that we have access to. Haste, hit chance, crit chance, mastery, spirit, all very good for us. Now, we're going to want a couple of different things here. So the first thing that we're going to be focusing on is our hit rating, of which we will always want 17% hit rating. Now you can see at the moment I'm a little bit overcapped. We do get hit rating from Spirit as well through our Elemental Precision, so hitting this hit cap is very easy as Elemental. Now, after we've hit the 17% spell hit cap, we don't get any benefit past that, so being overcapped doesn't do anything, it is just wasted stats. Next then we're going to go to Haste and Mastery, which are roughly equal. If you are massively above on one, the other one becomes better for you. You want to keep them balanced as much as possible. Haste obviously gives you faster cast speeds, which means more lightning bolts, more fulmination procs, things like that. Mastery means that every one of your casts has a chance to duplicate, which again means that the more casts you're doing, the more duplicates you get, so on. So they both offer around the same amount of DPS per stat. Obviously, like I said, if one is massively above the other, then try and aim for the other one to balance them out. Crit is by far our worst stat. You gain so much inherent crit chance just from Elemental Oath and Acuity, as well as raid buffs and things like that, that you really don't need it as an Elemental Shaman. It's nice to pick up the occasional bit of crit, but you're not going to be ever prioritizing it unless you get so far enough haste and mastery that crit suddenly becomes, you know, your best stat, which I don't imagine it's ever going to. In terms of our stat priority for PvP then, we're going to be wanting as much stamina and resilience as we can on gear pieces, and after that it's going to be primary stat is king. Now this is kind of the same for PvE as well. Primary stat is amazing, but you'll probably be using as much of your off-color gems to balance things like haste, hit, and mastery, as well as your intellect. Whereas in PvP, you just want as much survivability as possible. Now, in terms of your damage stats then, mastery is king. And the reason for this is because, like I said, in the talent section, you don't get to cast that much in PvP, right? You're not going to be able to sit there and just tunnel damage into a target, which means in them brief moments that you are going to be able to do damage, you're going to want to be able to duplicate as many spells as possible to be able to maximize your burst in those windows. So for me, it would be making sure you're at your 6% hit cap, making sure then you have as much intellect and stamina and resilience that you can get, and then outside of that is just mastery. So let's talk racials. For Horde you have 4 options, for Alliance you have 2. Now going through the Horde options you have Orc, Tauren, Troll and Goblin. Now Goblin is the new addition with Cataclysm. It brings a minor haste consistent buff, as well as the ability to use a little bit of mobility with the rocket jump. The rocket launch itself does minimal damage and I believe is on the global, so pretty weak. Now, we then have Troll bringing Berserking as its major buff, a haste kind of bloodlust type effect. Works really, really nicely with Elemental Mastery to pair together and just pump damage out. Tauren brings War Stomp, and it's basically the only benefit of being a Tauren, other than the fact they look quite cool. And then Orc brings Blood Fury, and this is where, unfortunately, Chamois are going to have the rough end of the deal in terms of race diversity. Orc is just the best for us. Blood Fury provides so much extra damage that it competes with every other racial by itself, and the fact that you can snapshot this with your 2-minute fire elemental, yeah, I mean, you're going to do so much more damage being Orc than anything else as Horde, unfortunately. Now, if you are one of those Alliance players, you have the option of Draenei or Dwarf. Now, while I think Dwarves look amazing, I mean, I'm 5'8", ginger beard, I am the epitome of a Dwarf. Unfortunately, they don't offer anything useful really to be a Shaman. You're going to want to be a Space Goat. They offer 1% hit, and while that 1% hit isn't going to be particularly hard to hit as an Elemental Shaman, it's really the only benefit you get for being Alliance. So, unfortunately, you don't get many damage increases for being an Alliance Shaman, but if you are going to be optimal, Draenei's the way to go. Now, in terms of professions for Elishami in Cataclysm, we don't have too many options. The one profession that we are absolutely going to have if we are going to be efficient is tailoring. Now, tailoring offers us, when I can find it, light weave embroidery. It gives you a chance to increase your intellect by 580 for 15 seconds when casting a spell. Now, this increases our spell power by a significant amount, and it's actually our spell power that our fire elemental snapshots off. With the high proc per minute of the tailoring cloak as well, we're going to have this up pretty much every time we try and snapshot our fire ellie, and you know, it's just so much damage that you're going to have for the full 2-minute duration. So tailoring is a must. Every single Elishami that wants to play the game efficiently will have tailoring. Now, our second option is interesting. Engineering is by far our best under certain circumstances. So if we just look at engineering and why we would want it, Tinker, we have Synapse Springs. Allows a skilled engineer to increase their highest primary statistic by 480 for 10 seconds. Now, for exactly the same reason as tailoring, we can use this with our fire elemental to snapshot and get the biggest amount possible. However, this shares a cooldown with unused trinkets. So if you're using an unused trinket, this becomes a lot worse. However, and this is where we have to look at what you're trying to achieve in Cataclysm as to what the best profession is. If you are looking at the BIS pieces for each phase, you will never have an unused trinket. In phase 1, we're going to be using a Dark Moon card, which if I can find it, Dark Moon card Volcano, Mastery with a chance to proc damage and a lot of intellect, as well as then running the Bell from Atramedes, on Heroic of course, crit and another spell power proc. Now, the combination of this would be engineering, tailoring, both being like an on-use and a proc, and 2 proc trinkets. You're going to be able to snapshot your fire elemental with so much extra spell power, it's going to be ludicrous. If we look at Firelands then, we use 2 proc trinkets, the same as in Dragon Soul. So we're consistently going to be using proc trinkets as part of our BIS setups throughout the entire expansion. However, while we're working towards that, there are good on-use trinkets that we can use that do make engineering kind of worse for the time being. I don't think it's worth moving across to a different profession, especially since engineering also offers the helmet that really does allow us to kind of stat swap and maximize our stats with that as well. We could get this helmet and just shove haste mastery in there, and it's going to be a very competitive helmet until we get the heroic version of our tier helmet. So yeah, I mean, personally, I will be staying tailoring engineering for both PvE and PvP for the entire expansion. If you do, however, decide that you don't want to go tailoring engineering to start the expansion, my recommendation would be alchemy. Now, the reason for this is because one, true gold, you're going to be able to make a fortune at the start of the expansion. Secondly, then you'll have access to this trinket, which is intellect haste with a red socket, amazing for getting you started. That plus Volcano will last you pretty much to the end of the first phase. So, and both proc trinket, oh sorry, not proc trinkets, but stat trinkets. So yeah, I mean, I would probably lean towards alchemy as my third backup profession, but if you want to be optimal, then engineering is probably the way to go. In this part of the video, I'm going to go through every spell that Elemental has access to, when scenarios you might use it, and things like that. So let's get into it. Bind Elemental is like a banish just for elementals. It can be good for things like Deep Holm or Stoneclaw, things like that, where you are fighting elementals, but it's going to be such a rarity that you won't use this ability very often at all. You then do have Call of the Ancestors, Call of the Elements, and Call of the Spirits. This allows you to set preset totems up that you can drop at the press of one button. I'll talk more about totems later on in the video, so stick around. Chain Lightning then, with the combination of Elemental Fury, has no cooldown in Cataclysm, hits up 3 to 5 targets depending on the glyph, and does a significant amount of damage. This, as soon as you get to 3 targets, is going to be your primary cast spell. At 2 targets, it's not always worth it, but you might press it if you're just feeling lazy. And you're going to do so much damage. You're going to generate lightning shield stacks through Rolling Thunder, which you can spend on Fulmination to do quite a lot of damage as well. So Chain Lightning in this expansion is awesome. Does a lot of damage and procs with your Mastery to recast as well. So you can start living your Emperor Palpatine dreams. Earthshock then, by itself, doesn't do too much damage, but again, you're going to be generating Fulmination stacks that you can consume your Lightning Shield stacks with Earthshock to do heavy burst damage. It's very, very fun and does a lot of damage. Earthbind then is a pulse totem that does a slow to anything nearby every few seconds, lasting for 45 seconds. With the talent in the elemental tree, Earth's Grasp, it does also apply a root on the initial cast. It doesn't reapply the root with each pulse, it's only on the initial cast. But quite useful. You use this on fights like Maloriak, where you want to keep a constant slowdown in the room. This or the Ice Trap totem, Ice Trap from Hunters are very good for slowing adds and things like that. Elemental Fury makes it so our crit strike damage from Searing and Magma totems and your spells are increased by 100%. So you do a lot of damage with crits, but it's still not better stat than Haste or Mastery. You then have Elemental Mastery. When activated, your next Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, or Lava Burst spell becomes an instant cast. In addition, your Fire, Frost, and Nature damage is increased by 15%, and you gain 20% spell haste for 15 seconds. This is our cooldown. This is our traditional cooldown. Does a decent amount for us, increases our damage, increases our spell haste. You're going to use this on 2 different abilities in single target and 1 ability on AoE. So if you're in AoE and you want to use this, you're probably going to use it on Chain Lightning. If you are just standing still and tunneling the boss, you're going to want to use this on Lightning Bolt because it is your longest cast spell. If you're using this and you're on the move, you'll probably use it on Lava Burst. Now, the reason for that is because of the glyph Unleashed Lightning, you're going to be able to cast on the move anyway, whereas your Lava Burst might not be able to be cast at that time. So, I can stand here, do my rotation, and I have a Lightning Burst. I can just proc it with Elemental Mastery. So, you're probably going to want to use it on that, but if you're being optimal, stood still, you'd probably just use it on a Lightning Bolt. Next then we have Fire Elemental Totem, and this is the bread and butter of what will make Elemental good in the next phase. Now, this snapshot's based on your spell power. Doesn't snapshot on crit, haste, anything else, mastery, nothing. It is based purely on your spell power, and this will make trinkets like Volcano, which increases your intellect, and by increasing your intellect, increases your spell power, by such a large amount, so key to Elemental. Between this and the trinket I mentioned earlier from Atramedes, the Bell of Enraging Resonance, increasing your spell power by a further 2.2k, at the start of a fight you can have so many different combinations of things that you could have like 16k spell power for a short period of time, but you only need it for a couple of seconds while you press Fire Elemental Totem, and that will keep them buffs for the 2-minute duration. It is insane and does so much damage. Now, Fire Nova is something that you can use as Elemental, and you will actively use as Elemental once you start getting flame shocks rolling out on multiple targets. However, it isn't as strong as Enhance. You're not going to be able to spread your flame shock in any way. So for me personally, if you're moving, so what I tend to do is while the tank's pulling multiple mobs or pulling packs together, I'll be putting flame shock on different targets. Then you can start rolling Fire Novas once you've got it on 2 or 3 targets. If your tank just pulls like 1 pack, I'm just going to stay Chain Lightning and use my shock cooldown on Earth Shock. So, yeah, it's not really worth it, but, you know, you can run it as well. Frost Shock then is just a ranged slow. Causes a decent amount of threat, but you're never going to overpull threat with this. It doesn't do anything special. It's an 8-second duration slow on a 5-second cooldown. In PvP, this is amazing because you can keep someone slowed, obviously 100% of the time without them using, Purify or anything like that. So pretty cool. Hex then is a polymorph that lasts for 1 minute in PvE. In PvP, it lasts for some time. I don't know off the top of my head. Pretty cool. It's slightly weaker for Elemental than it is for Enhance because you can do this instantly with Enhance as with Maelstrom Weapon. But for Elemental, still pretty good. Keep this on your bars. Use it in dungeons. It's going to be nice just to, stick someone in a polymorph. Only works on humanoids and beasts, so do be wary of that though. Lava Burst then is a, staple of the spec. Does a large amount of damage and always crits as long as Flame Shock is on the target. Now, something that is interesting to note is that this mob has Flame Shock on right now, so I've cast my Lava Burst. It's guaranteed to crit. Now, you want to play around with this, and I'll talk more about it in the rotation part of this video, but if you cast Lava Burst and then cast Flame Shock, even before it lands, you won't get a guaranteed crit. Flame Shock has to be on the target before you've cast Lava Burst for it to guarantee crit. Something interesting to note. Hope that does help some of you. It's something that really annoys me. Shouldn't work like that, but it does. Lightning Bolt is going to then be the core ability you press in your rotation. And when I talk about, how many actual rotation further in the video, you'll see just how often we're pressing Lightning Bolt. It's a very simple spec to play. You generate Lightning Shield charges with Lightning Bolt at a 60% chance per Lightning Bolt. Your mastery counts as a separate Lightning Bolt. So does the Legendary Staff, by the way, just saying. You should definitely give your Legendary Staff to Ellie Chamis. But so you can do some really, really cool stuff with that. Lightning Bolt just hits quite hard and offers so much to the spec. Now, Magma Totem, if you are in any situation where you're AoEing, try and drop a Magma Totem. It's actually worth it. If you are not planning on using your Fire Elemental Totem, then just dropping a Magma Totem is so worth it. Does a decent amount of damage. It isn't going to be anything crazy. It does bring the Totemic Wrath buff as well, as do all fire totems in Cataclysm. So it is something to keep an eye on. But just dropping this in the middle of a pack and then going back to AoEing, it does do a decent amount of damage. Purge then. Purges the enemy target, removing 1 beneficial magic effect. This is amazing in PvP and one of the reasons why Shami is quite strong in PvP. In PvE, you're not going to be able to use this that often, but for fights like Maloriak, where you have to purge a buff off the boss, you are going to be one of the core classes to do that. Now, Searing Totem is something you're going to maintain if you don't have Fire Elemental Totem. As you can see, the range on it is awful. It's really frustrating. So you do want to make sure you're quite close to the boss when you're doing it, and it will always prioritize your Flame Shock or Storm Strike. Obviously, we don't have Storm Strike, but your Flame Shock or Storm Strike targets in Cataclysm. So, it does a decent amount of damage. It is cost effective and damage effective to cast this, but obviously you want to make sure that you've got Fire Elemental Totem up as much as possible. Shamanism then increases your spell power or your spell power coefficients of spells and reduces their cast time. It's one of the passives you'll pick up in Cataclysm. Spirit Walker's Grace then allows you to cast spells while moving, which we can do mostly anyway. But what's nice about this is I can sit there casting Lightning Bolt backward and forward, have someone spawn on my head, backward and forward, and then all of a sudden I get a Lava Burst proc and I'm going to just, move around. Or in AoE, I can sit there and spam Chain Lightning, which I normally wouldn't be able to do for the entire time. So really, really cool for keeping uptime, and there are times where you will absolutely want to use that and take advantage of it. It's one of those spells that it just, you should just be using very often because it comes up quickly, 2-minute cooldown, and it is just so, so useful. Now, Stoneclaw Totem by itself taunts targets or does like a pulsing threat effect to all nearby enemies. Enemies that attack the totem have a 50% chance to be stunned. It also protects your other totems, which is something that is very, very key in PvP. You know, to stop totem stomping, you drop this to keep all your totems alive. And with the glyph that I talked about in the glyph section, it also applies a shield to you. Now, this is a 20-second cooldown, applies a 16k shield that you can use every 20 seconds. It is insane. Use this as a defensive for pretty much any mechanic during progress, and you will take some of the least amount of damage in the raid. Thunderstorm then offers you a little bit of mana back, some AoE damage, as long as you have the glyph, which... Glyph of Thunderstorm, increases the mana you receive but no longer knocks enemies back or reduces their movement speed. In Heroics, this is actually a damage efficient spell to cast. You know, if I walk over to these totems, these target dummies, you know, 6k a target for an instant cast spell is quite good. And if you're going in to drop magma totems anyway, you know, that can be paired quite a lot for doing a good amount of damage. However, make sure you have this glyph. If you don't have this glyph, you will be trolling your group and they will hate you if you suddenly walk in and just ping all the mobs away. So, you know, something to keep in mind. Wind Shear is your interrupt. It's on a 5-second cooldown. It is one of the lowest cooldown interrupts in the game. And for that reason, and the fact that it's a spell and you're going to be spell hit capped, you are probably going to be on a lot of interrupt duties. It sucks, but you just are. Now, in terms of the other... what the other specs bring to Elemental, Bloodlust, of course. Earth Elemental, you can drop an Earth Elemental totem. It does a little bit of damage. Isn't going to do anything insane in terms of damage. If I just look here at how much damage it's doing, like 1,000 a hit. But, you know, it's not irrelevant. You can only have... Can you have both up? I don't even know. You can have both up. So you can have both up, you can pop both at the start of the fight if you really wanted to, and I'm sure at times on bosses you will do that. Your Earth Totem isn't something that is like massively contested in terms of totems that you need to drop. So dropping both, you know, all of a sudden you've got 2, but you can see the difference, right? My Fire Elemental with no snapshotting is hitting for 17k a tick, whereas my Earth Elemental is hitting for 900. Not really a comparison there, is it, unfortunately? The fact that it's hitting for 1700 a tick just shows you how strong Fire Elemental Totem is, by the way. That was without snapshots. Yeah, it's broken. So, Elemental Resistance Totem is probably the most needed totem ever. You get this through the Glyph Healing Stream Totem, which I'm pretty much always going to be running. It does exactly the same thing. There's no need to drop this glyph unless drop this totem unless you don't have the glyph. Of which case you may have to drop it, but yeah, I very rarely ever use this. Farsight's pretty cool, doesn't do anything awesome, you just, you know, we can see what we're doing from another place. Flame Tongue Totem increases the spell power of all raid and party members by 6%, while any totem you drop also gives Totemic Wrath, and they don't stack. So this is kind of useless, like a lot. You're never going to use it. Flame Tongue Weapon increases your magical damage done by 7% and allows us to unleash Elements Fire, which is one that we will be potentially using as Elemental. Talk more about that in a second. This is going to be your pretty much default imbuement at all times. Frostbrand you're never going to use. Ghost Wolf. Ghost Wolf is amazing because it will be instant cast if you have Ancestral Swiftness and be usable in most places, giving you basically an instant cast way to move very quickly. It's going to be useful at times, otherwise you'll just have Unleash Lightning and be able to cast while you're moving anyway. So it's not always useful, but for the times that it are, you're definitely going to want it. Grounding Totem doesn't get used very much in PvE at all, but being able to redirect a spell to the totem instead of you is kind of crazy in PvP. It's very, very good on a 25-second cooldown, so something you're going to want to use in PvP a lot. Lightning Shield, obviously you're always going to want to have Lightning Shield on. You should never have anything else on as elemental. With the glyph, you'll never be able to drop below. I've actually taken the glyph off because I was testing something earlier, so let's just put that back on before I forget. But with the glyph, you'll never be able to drop below 3 charges, so it's only going to run out if the timer runs out, as opposed to anything else. Rock Biter, we're never going to use. Stone Skin, I'll talk about totems in their own little section. Unleash Elements then is a spell that we do get in Cataclysm. With Flame Tongue, which is going to be our primary imbuement for Elemental, it increases our fire damage of our next spell by 30%. Now, one thing you can do is cast Lava Burst and Flame Shock at the same time, and both spells will be affected by the 30%. So you would have to apply this while you have Flame Shock still up, just to make sure that you get the instant cast. So that you get the guaranteed crit on Lava Burst. But as you just see, if I do that right there, that is going to apply a 30% increased Flame Shock as well as a 30% increased Lava Burst. Something to note, it's very, very minor and you're rarely going to do it. But if the stars align and you can apply it early, it's something worth doing. Water Breathing, Water Walking is just nice utility. Wrath of Air Totem provides us a nice spell buff. Spell haste buff, as does Wind Fury for melee. We're never going to use Wind Fury Totem because we're not melee and they should get their own buff. But Wrath of Air is very, very useful, so yeah. In terms of Resto then, we have Ancestral Spirit, Chain Heal, Cleanse. We can remove curses similar to Boomies. We are basically just better Boomies, sorry go. Earth Living Weapon we're never going to use. Greater Healing Wave is very, very heavy. We can use it a couple of times, but it is going to eat through our mana pretty quickly if we needed to heal. Healing Rain, it costs more, but it's actually more healing efficient for the raid. Something that you will be using as a elemental shaman is healing. Just don't underestimate how much you can heal with this on certain fights. Things like Chimeron, where it's a very healing intensive fight, everyone's stacked up. Don't be afraid to throw a healing wave out there. Healing Stream Totem should be down as part of your totems in most scenarios and does a good amount of healing for the group. Mana Spring Totem you can bring as well, but you shouldn't need to. Other classes should bring something better. Totem of Tranquil Mind. You can use this, but it's 30% less cast or channeling time when damaged. You should have Concentration Aura from a Paladin or something like that. You should almost never need to run this totem. Totemic Recall just allows you to pick your totems up, remove them, and give you 25% of the mana cost back. And Tremor Totem allows you to remove Fear and Charm and Sleep. And you can now cast this while you're afflicted with it. So if you are feared, you just bam, no more fear. Done. Great. Great change in Cataclysm. That is all of the spells for Elemental. This is going to be a long little segment, so I can only apologise. Hope this helps and you can reference this if you need to know anything more about the spells. In terms of the rotation, that'll be cool. Now we're getting into the good part, the rotation. Now, Shami have a couple of different things that we're going to try and do and maintain during our fight. So we're going to go through each phase individually and each part individually. So the first thing we're going to talk about is our pre-pull. Okay, so you have a 10-second pre-pull timer. What we're going to do is at 4 seconds, we're going to pop a potion. At 3 seconds from maximum range from the boss, we're going to cast 2 lightning bolts. Then we're going to cast a flame shock, lava burst. And by that point, everything should have procced. And that's when we're going to move into our snapshotting phase. Now, when I say snapshotting phase, it's literally just snapshotting all of our buffs with a fire elemental. Again, so Rune of Zeth, we have our gloves, we have, when I was alchemy, we had lifeblood, we'll have our potion popped, we will have every single proc in the game at that point ready to pop our fire elemental for the boss and hit it as hard as possible. So that's the second phase. Okay, so we've done our pre-pull, we've got all of our procs, we've now snapshot our fire elemental, and now we're going into maintenance. What I mean by maintenance is we want to keep 100% uptime on Flame Shock while using the maximum amount of Lightning Shield charges possible without overcapping. Now, it can be quite easy to overcap Fulmination charges or Lightning Shield charges because of your Mastery. So your Mastery has a chance for your Lightning Bolts to duplicate, and if they duplicate, the second one also has a 60% chance of giving you a Lightning Shield charge. So one cast can give you 2 charges. Now this is why the general rule for elemental shamans in Cataclysm is to do your lightning shield or your fulmination, your earth shock at 7 to 9 stacks. Now 9 is the maximum, 7 is kind of the minimum you want to do them on. The idea is you want to bounce between earth shocks and maximize as many fulminations in the fight as possible, and keeping an 100% uptime on flame shock. Aside from that, use your lava burst procs as they come up. Make sure that you're spending them so you're not getting duplicates. Use things like your elemental mastery, which will come off cooldown very, very quickly. Again, as soon as it comes off cooldown, just keep that going throughout the fight, and maintain totems and things like that. Overall, it sounds very complicated, and I've probably done a really bad job at explaining it, so I can only apologize. On the screen now, I'm going to go through and do like a minute rotation just to show you guys what it would look like. But aside from that, it's very, very simple. Ellie isn't a very difficult spec to play. It does perform good numbers. It's just overcomplicated at times. So bear with me. I'm going to set up and then we'll go through and show you what a live rotation looks like. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the stopwatch and we're going to start casting at 10 seconds. And we're going to go till 1 minute, 10 seconds. Okay, just so you can see like a full rotation. So we're going to stand at max caster range, which is probably over here somewhere. And it's very key you do this. If you aren't at max caster range, then you want to go slightly later on your pull timer, but we'll go through that in a second. So dropping our totems, because that's the most important part. Our searing totem might not even be able to hit from there, so I'm actually going to drop my searing totem just a little bit closer. And then we're going to start the stopwatch. So this is our countdown. At 6 seconds, I'm going to pop a potion. 7 seconds, I'm going to cast my first lightning bolt. Second lightning bolt. Elemental Mastery Lava Burst. And then now I'm going to pop my Earth Ellie. This is likely when you would Bloodlust as well, by the way. And we're going to go into our first fulmination. So that's a perfect opener there from us, which, you know, you'd expect. That's why you're watching this video, right? Now, we're going into our 7 lightning bolts, lightning shield stacks, so I know that I'm going to spend them because the next time my shock comes off cooldown, I'm going to want to refresh my flame shock. So lava burst cooldown coming up. Now, we are going to overstack on lightning shield charges potentially. No, we actually managed to get them off just in time. But that's it now. Like, the rotation is very easy. You're bouncing between lightning bolts and lava bursts. You're trying to maximize your fulmination stacks. You can see fulmination hitting very hard there. Our fire elemental is absolutely chunking. 47k that just crit for then. And you're just bouncing backward and forward. This is it now. Okay, so next one we're going to be doing a fulmination. And we've got nothing else to use at the moment, so we're just spamming lightning bolt. Lava burst has come up, so we're going to spend that. We've already got our elemental mastery down to 30 seconds. We are going to need to refresh our flame shock now on our next shock cooldown. So now we're going to flame shock, and this is perfect. You know, we're about to go into another elemental mastery phase, which is right now. Typically, my first elemental mastery cooldown is 1 minute with Bloodlust, which is kind of nutty, to be fair. And yeah, that's kind of the whole rotation. So I'm sure there will be questions and comments and things like that. I'm sure I can go over it better in another video if that's something that people want. But this is the basics of the rotation for Elemental Shaman. Now, rather than me give you a list of Weakauras that you go and take away and they don't suit what you want, I'm going to do something slightly different in this and give you a list of what you need to track with Weakauras. It will make it much easier for you to guys and go and get your own Weakaura packs and things like that and find and search for what you want. So the most important thing you want is something to track your fire elemental snapshots. That's the key thing that you're going to want to be able to track with this spec, is being able to track when every buff has procced so that you can pop your fire elemental. There's so many different Weakauras out there that do this. It shouldn't be hard to find. Go and find one that suits you, but you are going to want to find that. Secondly, then, you're going to want something that tracks lightning shield. Now, the reason for this is, as you saw when I was doing my rotation before, you want to be able to maximize your lightning shield casts, your earth shocks and your fulminations. You don't ever want to be overcapping, so if it isn't somewhere central in your screen that you can keep an eye on how many charges you've got, you can overcap very, very easily. So something to keep an eye on. Certainly later on in the expansion, you're also going to want to keep an eye on your lava bursts. With the Firelands 4 set, you do actually get, when your lava surge procs, you get instant lava bursts. That's something to be quite aware of, is that you can spend these very quickly. You don't want to ever be overcapping on these or wasting procs of these, so that it turns into something that's very, very important. So with lava burst, you can definitely work on trying to, make sure that you're tracking the procs. Aside from that, you want to make sure you're also tracking your flame shock, to make sure that that's not falling off either. You want to bounce between flame and earth shock, so maximizing the uptime on this is quite important. Aside from that, something to make sure that your totems are 1 down and 2 in range of you can be quite important. Aside from that, there's not really much else you absolutely need to play Elemental Shaman. In terms of macros then, I really don't have many macros here. I have a stop casting wind shear macro, as you can see on the screen at the moment. This just means that if I am mid-cast, I can press that and it's going to stop and cast it immediately. Which, it's not always great, but can be very, very helpful if you're on interrupt duty and suddenly it starts casting, you just bam, interrupt. The other one I have is this, which is a Cho'Gath interrupt macro, and something that is very, very important because it interrupts people who are mind controlled. Now, this is an amazing macro for specifically that one fight, because you can just press this macro, and as long as they are in front of you, you can instantly interrupt a mind control target on Cho'Gath. It's kind of broken, only works on 10 man because it only goes to 10. But yeah, something that is very important. I use this quite regularly when I was doing Bastion of Twilight. You then have a focus kick macro, just in case you ever trying to target one mob, but you're due to be kicking another mob, can be quite useful. In terms of Elemental Mastery, I have my old Swifty macro. I don't actually use this one very much anymore, just because I want to make sure that it's all being popped with Fire Elemental Totem, but typically you're using these together anyway at the start of a fight, so it's not too bad. Earth Shock, I have a couple of things here just to make sure that things like my 1 minute cooldown gloves, my lifeblood when I was herbalism, were all getting procced with my Earth Shock regularly. Aside from that then, you want to make sure that you have a focus flame shock macro if that's something you're interested in. For things like dungeons, being able to keep flame shock up on 2 targets can be quite nice. But aside from that, you don't really need many macros at all for Shaman to work, which is awesome. So yeah, finally then, and probably one of the questions I'm going to get asked the most about is totems. So Shaman have access to so much utility through totems, and really it looks like it should be complicated, but it isn't. So let's go through them. For your Earth totems, you're typically going to be running either Strength of Earth or Stone Skin Totem. Now, I know on White Main, Stone Skin Totem actually stacked with Devotion Aura, so it was very, very good, just giving an extra 4k armor. But, if that doesn't work on live, which I don't imagine it will, you could run either of these two, whatever your group is missing. Aside from that, you can use this as a utility slot. Stoneclaw is a defensive if you have the glyph. Earthbind is a slow. Tremor is utility. Earth Elemental's obviously a long cooldown. So typically I will always run Stone Skin as default during my Earth Totem. Now, Fire Totem offers one of the very unique reasons to bring Elemental Shamans to a group, and that is the 10% spell power buff in Totemic Wrath. So if I just proc that, you can see that as long as I put a Fire Totem down, I will have this buff. So keeping a Fire Totem down is very, very important, whether that be Magma for AoE, Searing for single target, Fire Elemental during our burst, or just, even if you've got nothing you want to hit, Flame Tongue just to get this buff up. Now, our Water Totem offers a couple of different things as well. Mana Spring Totem is shared with Wisdom, which is now actually Blessing of Might, but it's under the same buff, or from a Fell Hunter from a Warlock. Now, if you have neither a Pally or a Warlock in the group, dropping Mana Spring Totem could actually be very, very useful for your healers, and they will probably appreciate it a lot. Aside from that, you should almost always be running Healing Stream Totem, unless you happen to need the resist and you're not running the Glyph of Healing Stream Totem. Now, air is where it gets a little bit more complicated. You have two major options for air, and that's Wrath of Air, which is your 5% spell haste, or Wind Fury Totem, which is your 10% melee attack speed and ranged attack speed. Now, if you don't have, I'm just checking the buffs now to make sure I'm not going to talk nonsense. If you don't have a Frost DK or a Survival Hunter in your group, or another Shaman, then you're going to want to drop the attack speed buff. If you don't have a Shadow Priest or a Boomkin in your group, then you're going to want to drop a Wrath of Air, the Spell Haste Totem. If you don't have any of those in your group, then it's quite a crazy group, especially in a raid. Then I would always go towards the Spell Haste Totem. It benefits your healers, it benefits yourself. You know, be selfish with it. But if you can be and bring that utility, there are times where you're going to have to bring that Wind Fury Totem. Survival is a very good hunter spec, and you'll see a lot of them. Frost DK is something you probably won't see so many of. And Enhancement Chamois you probably won't see loads of either. So there are times where you may have to drop that Wind Fury Totem as well. But overall, that's the totems, and that's kind of everything covered that I want to cover in this Elemental Shaman Encyclopedia. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I'm pretty sure I've covered everything I can think of personally. Thank you for watching. In terms of things like best in slot lists and things like that, I will be working on that in another video. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. If you've enjoyed this content, sub to the channel. We've just hit 3,075 subs. It's gone up really quickly. Let's see if we can get us to, what, 3.5k before Cata? Seems doable. Let's do it. Catch you later. Thanks for watching. Bye. I'm in next. Thanks.